Hi everyone, Zach here. Welcome to lesson 101 of this RTS tutorial series. In this video, we'll finish up working on the primary parts of our enemy engineer unit. In particular, we'll address some errors from the last video, and we'll set it up so that the enemy controller is charged for the construction of the unit and not the player. There'll be other things we have to do with regards to the engineer down the road, but those will relate more to resource management buildings, building barracks, and just other elements of gameplay, and not things particularly related to the engineer itself. This series has been brought to you by my Patreon sponsors like Random Number Generator. That said, open up your project and let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the editor. So in the last video, we had our enemy units spawning in an engineer. You might have noticed that it wasn't spawning in anything that had its sort of proper profile. If we hit play, you notice these two units do, and that unit doesn't. And this unit, and any unit we spawn, so if I actually spawn everything, we can. Let's speed up. You'll notice that that one doesn't have the right profile, nor does that one, and nor does that one. So the issue, what's going on there, and I'm not sure why this happened in the prep file too, is randomly the unit master, the construction script, broke. So if that's happening to you, just make sure that's plugged in. That resolves the first thing we need to take care of. Let's just make sure that actually works. Let's hit play. You notice our resources are still being reduced. And there we go. We have something. I thought we resolved that actually where we couldn't open up the enemy's profile. Let me just make sure. Okay. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but we should not actually have the ability to control anything coming from here. So we're going to have to double check some stuff along the way and make sure it's working correctly. Like I said, there's going to be some cleanup. And now I'm paranoid that for some reason I've reversed something somewhere. So we're just going to train an engineer unit so it's consistent. No, I have not. And we shouldn't be able to get that open either. Okay, so something has changed. It shouldn't have changed. Let's take care of what we need to take care of first in terms of making sure the right resources are reduced. And that it gets from... So we need to take care of a few things. We need to take care of, one, making sure the correct team's resources are reduced. Two, that it breaks from just sitting here and cycling here indefinitely. Three, the fact we can open the profiles up for the enemy team's unit and for the enemy profile for the building. And five, that we can control the enemy unit. We'll tackle those last three very quickly in the start. Let's open our unit master back up. So we should have this reference cast where if it is not controlled by the AI, there should be this. There would be the HUD. So technically that shouldn't have worked because we're coming through here. We're checking the team. So let's just go back down to our. Is not controlled by the AI. So that actually is working. We've tested it, and the way we're going to test it further is we're just going to cheat, and we're going to put in a engineer unit. We're going to is controlled by that and hit play. So I can't open that profile, and now I can't open that building. I can still open the training post. For some reason, the training post it thinks it's owned by the player. Oh, sorry, that should be is controlled by AI. That would explain the issue. I hit the wrong thing. So now I can't open that up. Sorry, that wasn't a bug. That was just me not paying attention in the last video. So we hit play now. It will spawn in a unit. Notice again our resources. We can't, however, open that profile, and it instantly gets to work. We can't even select that unit when it comes back out. So there it is. I can't select it, but I can still select my two units over here. Now, there we go. That's one of the errors we were expecting. That's fine. That's one of the things we're going to address. So let's go to our training post. Let's just grab that, hit edit training post where you have this open. Let's go to our event graph first. We do actually need to get into our spawn unit towards the end of this video, but we have other parts we need to tackle first. So, in our event graph, well, we could do this in a couple of ways. First, we have this unit trainer ref, which, if you don't remember, is this right here, which literally just stores the cost of our units based on the unit type we want to spawn in. We could, and we're not going to, but we could, in our AI, in our enemy AI, in the enemy pawn in particular, spawn in another one of those, check who the owner of this recruitment post is it the AI or the player, based on the team, and then get the cost from there. However, and that is, if you do that, by the way, it allows you to have a more complex system in that, you know, certain units might be cheaper for certain teams. So you can have more diversity and you can set up different balancing structures, which is a brilliant idea, actually, to go through. However, for the purpose of these videos, and I might do that in the side series, but for the purpose of these videos, we're actually going to rely on this, so that, you know, the idea of someone cheats by changing the cost of their units as players, then it's going to change for the enemy as well. Now, I mentioned the side series. The side series is, after the next section is completed, I'll be covering different sort of adjustments that can be done to this project based on questions, like adding in walls that you can build or construct using splines, same with the roads, adding in various features we haven't used. But that said, I probably will do one on different unit costs for different teams, so I'll come back and update this, but we're not going to do that in this series, or in this video at the very least. What we are going to do, since we're getting this information, is we are going to update some stuff here. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take all of this, and we're just going to move this down a bit, so we need a little bit of room. And I'm going to reline everything back up, just because it's going to drive me crazy otherwise. There we go. And we're going to pull off of here, and we're going to do a new branch. And unfortunately, the pins will cross a little bit. We can't get around that. Oops, sorry, that actually should not have been lined up. That should just go down here. What we're going to do is we are going to check, and I'm going to move that though. We're going to check who owns this. And we want to go, is controlled, or sorry, does the AI control it or does the player control it? Is controlled by AI. We're going to do a not Boolean, and we're just going to plug that into there. So if the player owns it, it goes through this, it checks our resources and goes, well, either you have enough resources or you don't. We actually have to do the same thing for the AIs. We're going to do a branch down here. The only difference is, actually, you know what? I don't like what I'm doing. We're going to leave that. We're going to unplug this. Sorry, I'm changing from the prep file. I just realized there was probably a cleaner way to do this. Just move this all back this way for a moment. Actually, let's grab everything here. And let's move it back. And then I'll just line that back up in a second. So what we're going to do instead is actually have the branch also. We're going to have it here on the trigger text. That's all we're really checking is the trigger text. And we're going to, actually I'm not even going to have the branch. We're not even going to have the branch. I'm just going to paste my previous branch in there. There we go. If it is not controlled by the AI, if it's the player, we'll trigger the text. If not, we don't need anything. But what has to change, however, is whose resources are we checking? So, let's go into here. Well, currently we're just checking the player. Well, if we're controlled by the AI, then we're going to need something else. So we're going to actually do a branch here. And we're going to just bring this down here, and this will go off the false, just so I don't have to move every one of those pins. Even though I'm about to just move them all right now to make that. To do that, we're going to get is controlled by AI. If it is not controlled by the AI, and there was a player controls it, well, our check's already there. If it is controlled by the AI, we'll get our enemy pawn reference, which again, we cast to in a couple of videos ago in our building master. We will pull from here. We will get our wood resource, which I just looked over at my prep file and I have the wrong variable there. Make sure it's wood resource, not max wood resource. Okay, so it's wood resource. And those sort of mistakes, getting it wrong like I did in my prep file, can actually be very problematic. Think about Aliens Colonial Marine. A small typo killed their AI. And then we're going to do ore resource. So get ore resource. And we're going to do the same thing we did here. We're just going to check. So I'm going to move these up just a bit. I want a little bit more room between them. So we're going to get our wood resource. We want to know, is our enemy pawn's reference, is our enemy pawn have enough? So is it equal to or greater than the cost amount? And then we'll do one off of, we'll do the same thing off of our ore resource. I know it's not exactly pretty or neat, but unfortunately this is the easiest way to tackle this. And then we'll do the same thing we did here. We'll just Control W that. And if both of these are true, then we return true. If only one is true, we return false. If neither are true, then we definitely return false. Alright, so now we are checking based on which team it belongs to if there's enough resources. Now, we're still reducing from the wrong person now. So that's our reduced resources here. Well, in our reduced resources, we're going to have a very similar setup as we just did a moment ago. We're going to break this. We're going to take all of these nodes, including that reroute that I missed, and drag these down here. We'll do a branch, and off the false, we'll come down to the player side, and we're going to do is controlled by AI. So if it is controlled by the AI, or not controlled by the AI, if it's a player, we have our setup already. If it is, we're going to replicate this setup with our true branch. So we'll get our enemy pawn. We will set wood resource. Just plug that into there. And we're going to put a few reroutes in. As you can see, I'm kind of mirroring what's on the bottom there already. That's also not what I meant to do. God knows I probably am mirroring what I did in the video where I somehow did that same mistake and dragged the wrong thing. Alright, so from here what we're going to do is we are going to get wood resource. We are going to do float minus float. And we're going to plug that return into there. And we're going to get our cost and plug that into there. Sorry, just cleaning things up so it reads a tiny bit better. Alright, so there we go. We now have reduced our wood from our enemy pawn. Let's next set our ore. So set ore resource. And we're just going to do the same thing. We'll plug the execute in. Again, we're mirroring what's down at the bottom. So you probably are going to get past me in the video if you're just copying this and not following me very meticulously double checking that everything is lined up correctly, because yeah, I'm weird like that. And again, we're going to get from here our ore resource. We are going to subtract from it the cost, not decrement. So you could try copying some of the nodes from below. It might make it easier. It won't allow you to plug in things that, like, even though there's both wood resources, you can't replace the owner of that wood resource. Alright, so there we go. We have our setup, and I'm going to just add a couple more reroutes in so it's a little bit neater, and duplicate my return pin, or node. Alright, so now we are reducing both, depending on which team it is, from the correct team. So we can reduce from the player, we can reduce from the AI teams as needed. Alright. So let's test this out. Let's make sure this actually works. Notice our resources haven't changed, but there's a new unit. But we still have this issue where it's still in here. Now, if you open this up, you'll see that nothing, if we use either one of these, is running. That's because it's gotten to the end of this and it goes, I don't know what to do now. I'm not finished. You haven't said I'm done. So that's why we're getting some of those errors. Again, we will tackle that error in just a moment. That's one of the final things we'll do. If we do a finish execute here, you're going to see something hilarious. You're going to see a whole bunch of errors real quick. Alright, let's just go this way for a moment. By the way, that's not the same unit. It's not the same unit. No, you're going to see this. It's going to keep spawning these units in indefinitely. And there are a few reasons for that. Eventually, it's going to run out of resources. Actually, I should have run out of resources a while ago. There we go. So we have a whole bunch of issues. Alright, so we can't just finish execute there. As much as we'd like to, we just can't. So what we need to do is we need to go back to our training post for a moment. And we need to consider what's happening here. So, if we're out of resources, we need to actually trigger an event. So we don't have enough, so that's false, and we're not the player. We need to trigger an event. When we have finished spawning in a unit, so we go to our spawn new unit, we also need to trigger another event. Let me just line those up. So there are a couple of ways we can do this, and this is what I was getting at when I talked about replicating our entire setup inside the behavior tree or inside a task, or using what we have. We could replicate all of this and avoid having to communicate across things. However, that poses issues of bad design. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new enum. And now if you're doing this in C++, this is so much easier because notice how many enums we have. A lot of these enums, like vehicle type, unit type, female names, male names, last names, month names. Actually, I wouldn't use this enum at all in C++. I would just use a switch on integer. But if you watch my C++ series, eventually we'll get to that one. All these things would be built into the particular class files for each of these. So it wouldn't be as messy. And again, they'd be global. But we need a new enum. So let's make our new enum, and this will be our training progress enum. This will just be used by the enemy team. I'm just going to have 3 enumerations. One will be in training. This will be our default state. One will be training completed. And the last one will be training failed. Alright, I don't know how I open that up. Save that. Control S, save everything. And I'm just going to pop back over here to the main part of the map. By the way, if you don't know that trick, you select whatever you want and hit F. And it will bring it into focus. So now that we've done that, let's go to our folder for our enemy AI. Let's open up our enemy pawn. Now, if you remember in the last video, I said, and I didn't do what I said I was going to do in the last video, so let me take care of that now as well. It's actually not our enemy pawn we needed, so it's fortunate that I realized I skipped something last video and that I said I would do. But if you remember in the last video, I said we need a reference to our controller, and there are 2 ways to do it, and you can skip one and use the other. But finally, sorry about that, here's the other one you could do. And now I'm just going to put this in here so you can see it. Again, this is optional. So either you're going to need to do in your, let me get the right thing up. So again, if you don't remember, in our training post, or our construct enemy unit, we have this cast to our controller. You can either do it here, or every time we need it in a task, service, or decorator, or we can only cast to our pawn, and from our pawn, we can get our AI controller. Now remember, when you do get AI controller, the controlled actor doesn't default to self. You have to get the reference to self. And then we could cast from this to our enemy controller AI, and because I'm using pure cast now, we're just going to use pure cast. Promote that to a variable, and this will be our enemy controller ref. So this is the other option I was talking about in the last video. You could use either one of these. So anytime in this video, if you go with this option over having and decide to delete this stuff, you can reference the enemy pawn. Sorry, that's what I meant to highlight. You can reference the enemy pawn, and then from the enemy pawn, reference the controller. So this is the second option that I was talking about. Now, why do we need this? I said we're going to need our enemy controller at some point. We could do it in the pawn, but I think in terms of good design, good encapsulation, knowledge about the AI, I should say, in the AI. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a custom, two events in here. One function, one custom event, which is actually still a function, but that's neither here nor there for a moment. We're going to do set, or custom event first. Set training status. And we're going to do an enum called training status. And that's that enum we made a few minutes ago before I went into my little rant, or training progress. We will set this here and just pull back off of there and plug it into our input pin. There we go. That's all set up. And we need a function called get training state. Actually, sorry, should we get training status? It is a state as well, so I mean either or works, but I've already used status in the last one. I'm just going to be consistent. Make sure to mark it as a pure function. Get a return node. And if this were C++ again, this would be a forced inline function. And just returning the training status. Alright, so that takes care of our controller. We just need to call these things up to let the AI know what to do. So now we've done that, let's go to our construct enemy unit. And we're going to go to our event graph here. And we're going to create a new custom event here. And this will be complete training. This event's going to run on a loop, by the way. So we have two options to how to get things. I'm going to show you both, depending on if you've used this enemy controller or not. So if you use the enemy controller, you can just pull off of here and do get training status. If you've gone with the other option of not having to cast it out multiple times, you get the enemy pawn reference, you get the enemy controller. Sorry, I need a controller reference, didn't I? Get enemy controller reference, and then you do get training status. So either options are acceptable. Just probably want one, not both. We will do from here a switch. And, well, we will have our training complete. We're going to do a finish execute. It will be successful. And we will have on our training failed, finish execute not successful. But we have to call this up. So, we're going to call it up here. And what we're going to do, we've done this a couple of times, is we are going to set a function by, or set a timer by function name. So let's say set a function by timer name. So there we go. We want this, so I'm just going to cheat a bit. Again, I'm going to just copy the name from there so I make sure I have no typos. And I'm going to bring this all the way over here, paste it in. And, sorry, I didn't mean select all. Let's go with 0.2. Looping, make sure that it is looping. And we are going to want to promote this to a variable, and this will be our training timer handle, because we want to turn this timer off at some point. So we're actually going to do that in here. And we're going to get our training timer handles, and we are going to pause. Plug that into there. Plug that into there. Duplicate the pause. And plug the handle back in. There we go. So when this triggers on either failed or completed, we're pausing our handles and we're going, well, either this worked, completed, or we didn't train the unit and we failed out. All right. So, and again, I'm going to show you we're going to do one more thing. We're going to have one bug, that is, but we're going to do one more thing first before we start addressing the final bugs and finishing this up. So we can test. I'm leaving this bug in for a testing purpose. I want to make sure that if we are out of resources, that it stops spawning units in. So I'm actually going to have a breakpoint there. And the way I'm going to test this is I'm going to go back to my training post. I'm going to go back to my event graph. And on my event graph, right down here, I'm going to get my enemy pawn reference. Okay, so I guess I just realized something. You do need in your enemy pawn that optional cast we did in this video isn't optional. We actually do need it. So we need to get our controller. So we need to get our enemy controller. And from here, we need to set status. In fact, we need to do this a couple of times. So we're going to copy these nodes. But before I set this one in particular, I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to not have the reroute selected. Control C copy, and this is training failed because we do not have the resources. Let's go to our spawn new unit. Like I said, we're gonna have to do things in here, so let's take care of those things. I didn't do them in the last video just because we were testing other things and the video is running a bit long. So at the very end here, what we're going to do is we are going to do a couple of checks. Let's first paste this in here. This will be completed. And we're also going to want to get from here, and we're going to set all units. We're going to actually do this a couple of times. Actually, no, we're going to skip that step for now. So we're going to come back to. So let's check here, make sure, because we had that error before. We have nothing in there related to the player controller. We don't. It's related to the queue length, so it's this sort of stuff. So in here, where we set our queues, what we want to do, anything that refers to the HUD, or the interface, we're going to do on a branch. So branch. I'm just going to move all of this down slightly. Let's just line that up so it looks a bit nicer. Okay, so off of here, we're going to do is controlled by AI. And if it isn't, then we have the player's information. If it is, we're just going to do a return node and not a return resources. And again, just line that up. Probably could end up having a little bit more. Actually, I'm just going to move all of this a bit so it's a little bit nicer and neater looking. Oops, I wanted to leave that pawn that's selected. There we go. All right. So that should resolve one of those other errors. Let's go back into our... The reason why I'm doing it there is just in case you want to be able to open the enemy post and you don't want to see the training queue, that is how you're going to do it. So that will allow you to see, you open the HUD for the enemy post, but not see their training queue. So again, you could just do this next step and move everything onto the, and move this onto the true, or onto the false, sorry. So what I mean by that is we're going to do another branch here. And we're going to do is controlled by enemy AI again. And if this is true, then we are going to set our training status to training complete. Again, you could move this and skip the step we just did and set that on the false there instead. But I like the idea that you might want to be able to open up your enemy's training post or enemy's buildings just to see the health at some point. So a couple of options on how to approach this. It's up to you. Again, you can skip this and put it in, this entire branch there instead. So you have options. Explore your options. Try different things. See what works for what you want to do. All right. That said, let's go back to our construct enemy unit. Let's set, make sure that's set correctly. It is. And we should still get an endless supply of units. Now the question is, why did we fail? Alright, we're still getting the fail, which is good. Except for I put the breakpoint in the wrong spot. So this is being triggered. I'm just not sure why it's being triggered. So, I think the only time we actually trigger it is if the resources are there. We should have one of the buildings destroyed as well. So, if we don't have enough resources, this will trigger it as well. Let's hit play. There we go. So, it's saying we don't have enough resources, and it's triggering this event. So we can hit resume. We're going to get the other breakpoint now. We can remove that. We can hit resume. And you can see it's going to end up spawning in several units. There we are. So it's spawned in all the units. We know it's reducing resources, and it's running out of resources because it spawned in too many. Look at our nice set of units there we can't select. And of course this is leading to still some issues with our HUD. So update training queue. And what we're going to do with this one is what we did in our remove from training queue. In fact, let's see where update training queue gets called at. Well, we could just do it outside of it and do this branch here. Plug the update training queue into the false. So it still continues on to the spawn in to spawn the unit in, and plug that in. So regardless of if it's, controlled by the AI or not, we have that event. So that will take care of that lovely issue. All right. So the next thing, let's just make sure that that issue is gone. Let's just speed this up. And I'm just going to go back here for a minute, and I'm just going to... All right, we have spawned in as many as it can take. Still can't select it, still can't open them. And... well, that's a new error on me. Attempted to access index 0. Well, we're going to resolve that error either way, because it shouldn't happen when we take care of the next step. We need to finish the execute properly, and we haven't yet. So the way we're going to do that, and I'm going to just be cautious about this, is I'm going to set all units here. Now this actually won't work properly. We'll have still one more bug left if we just do it this way. In fact, we can skip this step and just do the next step, and it works perfectly fine. But like I said, I'm going to be cautious. I'm going to hit play. It spawns in one unit. Spawns in a second unit. Spawns in a third unit. Okay, that actually shouldn't be happening. So, let's go to our construct enemy unit for a second. Actually, let's go to our status check. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit play for a moment here. I'm just going to move this to the other window. We're going to switch this over here. And... oh, why is it not seeing the engineer? It should actually spawn 2 units in. I already have 3 on screen. I see the mistake I made. So I said we're going to do this outside of here and just have it come through. We can't. We need this still to be set in here. So we need to have our control branch in here. That's why that error is not coming up on my other version. There's a reason I did it this way. Move that there, move that there, save it, go back to the event graph, because I was wrong in what I said, and we want to have this regardless. So we can get rid of that branch. Now we should only get 2 units spawning in. Famous last words. Yeah, we're only going to get 2. But say the AI is ready for action. Spawn 2 in. Well, what's happening is everything is happening at once. It's all going off not simultaneously, but so close that the list, let's go to our spawn for a moment here. This update isn't going through in time. So we could, and I don't want to do it this way, in our check state, well, get our list. That's like we do for our training post. We could get our list down here. That's just resource intensive. But what we can do is when it's done training, we still trigger this update here. Well, on this update, when we actually trigger it, we could in here, we call back to the unit or the pawn and do update our pawns. Or, so that's the one spot you could do it in. Or the other spot you could do it in that isn't the state check, which again is the other optional spot, is in our construct enemy unit. When we finish, right before we actually finish the execute, in here we can set all units. So let's break that for a moment. Let's grab our enemy pawn reference and set all units. So again, 3 places you can place this node the second time. So once in the training post, the second time can either be here in our construct enemy units, in our state check, or in our enemy AI controller at the end of the status, or this set training status. So any of those 3 will fix the issue. Notice we have, interesting, that shouldn't actually have happened. Well, it wasn't doing it in my prep file, and now it is doing it in my prep file as well. Sorry, I had to just double check my prep file. I guess, well, we have to go with the less good option here. We're just going to move all of these nodes just for a moment. And we're going to also move this one. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to grab all of these minus that. Just drag those down there. Another reroute in. Line those up. Off of this reroute here, the second to last one, we will set all units. See if that resolves the issue. If not, I'll pause this video and very quickly work out the solution. So there's 1, 2. Alright, I guess I have to pause the video. 3. That's strange. Okay, so don't use this approach that we just did. And now I'm going to very paranoidly control Z everything back before I pause the video and make sure that that actually wasn't happening the entire time. So 1, 2. Actually, you're going to sit here and debug this with me. So it is seeing that that is done. Sorry, we ran out of resources. Oh, I know what's going on here. Sorry, I skipped a step. I said something very, very important earlier, and that was, and I can't remember if it was this video or the last one, that was, when we do this, we're going to have something between these two. That's going to resolve one of these major issues we're seeing. Let's get our enemy pawn. Actually, no, let's get our enemy controller. And we're going to set training status to in training. Alright, now we might still get 2 units spawning in. There's 1, there's 2. But we're only going to get 2. There's the original one. Or maybe not. Now I'm really concerned. We're just going to speed this up a bit. And yes, he's going to the... Did he just go to the barracks to sleep? Oh no, he has an error on location because everything's been repaired. Alright, so looks like it is working correctly and we're not spawning in extra units now. Good. Yeah, we're going to have that move to issue. That we'll take care of in a moment. Alright, so let me just pause this video and work out what's going on and why we're having multiple units spawn in. Alright, so actually I haven't worked out the solution. I have an idea for one, and I'm just going to pilot it here. Let's go back to our enum. Let's add in a new state. Let's make this actually the very first state that we have. And this is going to be idle. So, what we're going to do, if we go back to our construct enemy unit, is we are going to just move all of this for a moment. We're going to grab from here, and we're going to do another switch. We're going to grab our enemy control. Actually, we're just going to use... You know what, I'm just going to duplicate my enemy controller. I'm going to do a switch. Sorry, I'm going to get status. We're going to do a switch. And if it is idle, we'll go there. And then at the very end of this, what we'll do, and this might actually not work in the long term, but it might do for now. We will change this over to idle again. So if it is idle, if it is doing nothing, then we're going to go into training. And it's going to do this. If we're already in training, it's not going to add anything else to the list. So let's hit play, make sure that works. I'm a bit concerned that it hasn't done anything yet. So, first thing I want to do is I want to go back to here. I want to pop open this. And we are going to just make sure this defaults to idle instead. Hit play. There is one unit, and it hasn't spawned in a second unit. We're just going to wait a couple of moments just to make sure. And there goes Sam Davis to the next building. Alright, sorry about that. That resolves that issue. Now, why this might be a problem in the long term is that if we want multiple training posts going, this might not actually work. We might need to refactor this into the training posts themselves and work it a little bit differently. But that is something we'll take care of as our enemy AI gets more advanced. But that said, we are now spawning in our engineer and our training post for our enemy. We are reducing their resources. We have taken care of sort of the core components. The next step is going to involve a little bit more game logic than I normally involve in this sort of stuff, but that is just to make sure that the enemy doesn't keep spawning in wave after wave of infantry, that we are limited to the number of troops, or we have a limited amount of troops we can have based on our barracks, and we're going to allow for at least one more unit than our barracks allows for. So if we have 0 barracks, we'd have at least 1 unit. I might make that 4. I haven't decided what the number is going to be, but it has to be, and this is key, it has to be at least 1. And the reason for that, let's just delete that for a minute. Let's hit play. AI is doomed. AI is doomed. Let's undelete that, hit play. What's it do? It spawns in a unit, and this unit is what we need to construct other buildings. So either we have the engineer there and it goes, well, I can't do anything because I don't have a barracks or I don't have a training post, but we need a way to get more engineers if that engineer is killed, and we need a way to spawn in an engineer to construct buildings. You know, we can't spawn in a barracks first and then the engineer, because nothing can construct the barrack if there is no engineer. Again, I'll go over all this logic in the next video. Alright, that said, this series has been brought to you by my Patreon sponsors like Pinello911. If you've enjoyed this video or this series, go ahead and hit that like button down below. It really does help this channel out. And if you want to be here when we move on to the other parts of our system, go ahead and hit that subscribe and notify icon. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.